All right, good morning, everyone. So yeah, my name is Tim Chung. Uh, Currently work as a data scientist at a startup called Waterlily Planning. So we are a startup that's focused on bringing AI and machine learning to long-term care planning or elder care planning. Um, Maybe if we have a little bit of time towards the end of the talk, I can talk a little bit more about what it is that we're trying to build. Um, Before we get started, just want to say, yeah, it's an honor for me to be here with you guys. I've been excited for this talk. Um, a little bit of a fun fact about me that I'll share is I did my undergrad at University of Missouri MU. And at the time that I was a student, uh, there was an intense rivalry that we had with KU. I don't know how it is anymore these days, but it was very heated back then. And so I have a lot of friends that would be disappointed in me if they knew that I was here. Um, but actually, my life has become filled with KU people these days. It's kind of strange. My wife graduated from here. We have a lot of friends that are students and faculty and so forth. Yeah, KU is very much grown on me, and I'm happy to be here, despite feeling like I've just kind of betrayed my alma mater. And a quick thank you. I wanted to share thank you to Jenny Lohoffner. So she invited me to be here, but also as I was reflecting, I kind of realized how significant of a role she's played in my career. Um, a little bit of backstory. She not only helped me get my start in data science, but also connected me to the company that I'm currently working at. So yeah, back when I was a grad student, maybe similar to you guys, I got connected with Jenny, and long story short, she took a bet on me, gave me my first shot at practicing data science, kind of before I had really a chance to prove myself. And so I thank her for that, and um, I guess that'll lead me kind of into my first point. So this is kind of a bonus point. It's not really part of the talk, but I figured I'd throw it in there because it's something that I really believe in. Um, I believe that the best opportunities come through people. It comes through like connections and relationships, handshakes, coffee meetings, whatever it is. Um, and I'll just say that the best time to make these sort of connections is when you don't really need anything from them. Um, if you're like desperate to get a job, right, and you're kind of going out there connecting with people, that's great, and I think you should do that. However, it's a little bit more awkward, right, because people assume hidden motivation, right, and they're willing to help, but I think the best time to do it is probably now. Like if you guys are just now getting started, if you're um, yeah, you don't really necessarily need anything. You're just looking for community. Um, so I'll just start by saying, yeah, keep your network warm. Um, and In light of that, I'll make a quick plug. Actually, one great way to find community, find a network of people who are um, kind of like-minded, maybe practicing in industry what you're studying. There are a lot of local meetups in Kansas City, actually. So I help lead one that's called Data Science KC. We're kind of the premier data science meetup in town. And by that, I mean we're the only data science meetup in town. But we do have a little over 2,000 members on our meetup site. There's not nearly that many that actually show up, but it's still a very lively and kind of vibrant community. A lot of people that are practitioners, a lot of people that are students, people that are kind of adjacent to the industry. So a great way for you guys to get connected and learn about topics and kind of just stay up to date and see what other people are doing. Um, and a few other honorable mentions. So if data science is not really your thing, there's a DevOps Kansas City meetup group. Um, Led by, I think, a guy from Google Cloud, Aaron. He's a great community builder. There's Python KC, and there's Product Tank KC. So Product Tank is more for like product management, which is also very useful for you guys to get exposure to if you're going to be kind of going into tech. So yeah, get plugged in, go meet people. Okay, so what does this talk about? Um, so before the talk, I was speaking with Babak and Yusuf, and he kind of informed me that a lot of you guys are interested in going out into industry, like transitioning into industry after your time here. And so, uh, yeah, luckily that's really the only experience that I have to give you guys. I haven't really spent much time in academia, so I can't really give you much from that perspective. But I have spent a decent amount of time in industry in various roles. So I want to give you guys hopefully some realistic expectation on what you might expect as you transition into industry. But also I want to give an understanding of what I believe to be kind of most important in industry. That way you guys can start to kind of align your skill sets, your preparation accordingly. And I will say that, I am, as we like to say, kind of a sample size of N equals one. So this is just based on my personal experience. I try to make it as general as possible. So my experience mainly in industry has been at tech companies, mainly software companies. And so when I talk about working in industry, right, I'm coming from the place of working at a tech company, and also as an applied person, so like an applied engineer or practitioner. I'm by no means a researcher in industry, so that's going to be probably a different talk and probably a different set of experiences. But this is mostly going to pertain to yeah, being like an applied engineer. Okay, so oh, and I forgot to mention, feel free to interrupt me at any point in the talk. If there are questions, I think this is a small enough group where we can hopefully make it a little bit more interactive. So if you have questions or just like that, I don't buy that, want to challenge something that I say, I won't be offended at all. Okay, so I've entitled this talk, The Spirit of Industry. I know that's kind of abstract, but hopefully it will become more concrete throughout this talk. I'm not really great at naming things. But so I've tried to boil this down into kind of 5 principles. So I'll just go over them quickly right now. So there's application over theory, simplicity over complexity, short steps over long strides, interdependence over independence, and then business need over personal curiosity. So mostly I'll try to boil down, especially as a student, what are kind of helpful sort of mindset shifts, right, that are going to be required of you as you go from student or academic to practitioner. These are things that I definitely picked up over the years, and I hope will serve you guys as you're or as you're preparing to maybe go into industry. So let's get started with the first one, application over theory. Okay, so my career journey, just a quick snapshot. So I started off in business school, and then I went into consulting after that, and then I made kind of a career pivot into computer science. I became a master's student in computer science, and then eventually became a data scientist after that. And so the reason for my career transition, or kind of the pivot that I made from business to tech, is not because I didn't like business. It's not because I was kind of dissatisfied with business, but actually I saw that by not having technical skills, it was kind of inhibiting me. It was preventing me from being more impactful in business. Um, And so, yeah, the reason I got into business in the first place is because I thought of myself kind of as a creative problem solver. I like working on real world applications. And it was kind of into my career that I realized that not having technical skills means that you can ideate, you can kind of strategize, but when it comes to actually executing, you kind of have to pass that off to the engineers. And I didn't like that. And so I wanted to be able to kind of see something through from inception to kind of execution or delivery. So that's why I decided to move into computer science. Um, yeah, I say this because I came into computer science kind of with this bias towards application and this orientation towards application. And I think that's a really important mindset to have if you're going to go into industry. Like theory is obviously important. However, I think what it really takes to be successful is just an obsession with application. So knowledge and wisdom. So you can kind of, I don't know, kind of break it down like this, where I think academia tends to emphasize knowledge, theory, right? Um, and but in industry, I think there's more a focus on, I guess, what I'll call wisdom. So wisdom is, it's more practical, it's applied, right? It's learned through experience as opposed to being studied. Um, and so when you're transitioning from academia to industry, it kind of demands this mindset shift, where being knowledgeable is certainly important, but the amount of knowledge that you need in order to be a valuable contributor to an organization is actually probably less than what you might expect. Yeah, I was even just like listening to some of these talks, I was just blown away by the amount of knowledge some people possess. And that's fantastic. I think that will serve well. However, in industry, um, I don't know, so it's a little bit more simple than you might expect. Um, so yeah, when I was first getting started off as a data scientist, um, I think as most people tend to do, I was fighting like imposter syndrome. And I think the main way I would try to combat this feeling of inadequacy is by like just acquiring more information, acquiring more knowledge, right? I thought to myself, if I could just learn this theory or this model or this algorithm, right, then I would feel like a data scientist. Um, but when I got to industry, what I find is that what's actually more deficient, what's lacking more, is just kind of practical wisdom, um, intuition, empathy, business acumen, business savvy. Um, so when I'm hiring, I especially if the candidate is, they have a lot of credentials, or they have a graduate degree or something. What I really try to evaluate is um, how much this candidate is focused on kind of application, real world results. So one of the ways that you can kind of tell is um, when you're looking at someone's resume, you try to see what they're emphasizing. Like, are they emphasizing their technical skills, their their education, their certifications, and so forth, or are they emphasizing their project work, their experience, their community involvement? So the former kind of sections of the resume, right, like your skills, certification, so forth, that's going to speak to kind of a person that's more obsessed with knowledge and theory. But the latter set of skills, like your projects, your experiences, your community involvement, that's really going to speak more to someone who's, I guess, more oriented towards application. Um, and I will just add that experience in your resume doesn't always have to be like paid employment. I think experience is just as valid, especially from like a recruiter or like a hiring manager standpoint, is even volunteer work. Like if you're to do like pro bono consulting or offer your services, your technical skills to maybe an organization that doesn't have the means to pay you, like that kind of experience speaks volumes more than like the most complex side project or whatever that you could think of. Um, So point two is simplicity over complexity. As a student and in academia, I think the name of the game is complexity, novelty, state of the art, right? It's probably how you get publications and grants, and definitely how you get people to enroll in your classes by kind of teaching the most state of the art, kind of the most hyped things in industry. But in industry, I think that what's more highly valued is actually simplicity and reliability. And this kind of preference towards simplicity, I think, is really important for people just getting started in industry. So there's kind of this hammer and nail syndrome. When I was a new graduate, kind of fresh out of grad school, just starting to practice data science in industry, um, you kind of you see every problem you encounter as like a potential use case for all the sophisticated and complex techniques that you learned in school, right? And so it's kind of like that saying, like if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail, or maybe a better analogy is like, I don't know, like using a bazooka to kill a fly, right? There's um, that habit of just seeking to start with complexity for the sake of complexity's sake, like is a really kind of counterproductive and dangerous pattern in industry, um, because there's cost to complexity. One, it's obvious it's harder to build. If it's harder, it's going to take longer. It's harder to maintain going forward, right? It's not like school where you just submit your project and you're done with it. It's like you have to maintain this thing going forward, or other people have to maintain what you built going forward. So complexity is kind of a liability in that sake. And I think most importantly, complexity is harder to communicate. In industry, most of you, like some of your most important stakeholders are going to be non-technical people. So either maybe they're business executives that are funding your work, your project, or maybe these are the end users of the software that you're helping build, that are non-technical. And it's so hard, right, to get I don't know, there's just a huge language barrier between technical people and non. And so the more complex your idea, your solution is, the harder it will be to get adoption and kind of buy-in from certain stakeholders. So embracing simplicity. In industry, the goal is to find a practical and reliable solution, not necessarily to find the most technologically advanced solution. And so it's just important to kind of embrace the sort of seemingly unimpressive solutions, right? You're not going to feel very cool. Sometimes, I guess a data science example of this is, if I'm just using a very simple kind of linear regression model, right? It's not something that I'm going to like kind of geek out with my data science friends about at my data science meetup group, but it's something that could very efficiently add value to your organization, while also kind of minimizing the risks of complexity. So embrace that kind of that simplicity, right? It's not about how cool you feel about the solution that you've built. It's about kind of how impactful it is to the business and how quickly you can deliver that value. Okay, short steps over long strides. So Cunningham's law states that the best way to get the right answer on the internet is to post the wrong answer. And so it's kind of humorous, but it's true, and it highlights the fact that humans or people are much more eager to tell you that you're wrong and correct you than they are to just answer your question, right? And there's kind of a parallel principle or concept in industry called building in public. So the philosophy of building in public, this is actually like the mantra of open source software. And it's the belief that by continuously exposing your work or your product to public scrutiny, right, and all of its flaws, that either one of two things will happen. Either one, you will end up with a much better final product, or two, you will find out fairly quickly that what you're building should not be built, that it's not worthwhile. And so those two outcomes are exactly what you want in business. You either want to make a great product, right, iteratively, or you want to find out fairly quickly that what you're building is not the right thing to build, and to be able to pivot and learn quickly. Um, so I think it's important to adopt kind of this experimentation mindset, where sometimes as a student or in academia, you can go off for months or maybe even a year and work on a project until you feel it's just right. And you cannot do that in industry. That is like a complete anti-pattern. So it's not about kind of perfecting your work before you release it to others. It's really about kind of asking yourself the question, what is like the minimum amount of work that I need to do in order to get reliable feedback? So if you think of an experiment, right, the point of an experiment is not to just run the experiment, it's to get insight, it's to get information. And so similarly, a lot of times what you're building, you just kind of want to quickly build and put out there for people, like actual people to see and give you feedback on and use and scrutinize it. Because the odds are what you're building, um, especially if you're in your early kind of stages of the project, it's not the right thing. Right? You got to acknowledge the fact that the first few tries, you're always going to get it wrong. And so when you're building, don't try to perfect it. Just try to get kind of the bare minimum that needs to be out there for you to get feedback on it, so you can iterate and learn from it, and either scrap it because it was completely wrong, or just, continue to improve it and iterate on it. So you'll find that in industry, the project sort of timelines are much shorter for this very reason, right? It's kind of prohibitively short for perfectionists like myself to just spend way too long on something, feeling like it needs to be perfect before it kind of gets shipped out. And it's to kind of foster that mindset of experimentation, shortening the feedback loop, so that you can fail quickly, right? Fail cheaply. Because yeah, if it takes you too long to fail, that's obviously going to be detrimental to the business. You could either lose funding on your project, or in my case, I'm at a startup. We could just run out of runway completely and go out of business, right? If it takes us too long to learn that this was not the right idea. So I've already kind of touched on this, but embrace that discomfort of, especially if you're a perfectionist, of putting something out there that's imperfect, that's incomplete, right? It's so hard for me to know all the deficiencies in what I'm building, but just release it, right? It takes a lot of, I don't know, just a mindset shift and a lot of kind of training to be able to do that, but that's kind of the nature of industry. Okay, my fourth principle is interdependence over independence. Um, so if you guys have seen this movie, it's The Hangover, but it was a kind of a funny meme. Because every group project in school you've ever done, there's a guy that does 99% of the work. There's the guy that has no idea what's going on the whole time. There's a guy that says he's going to help, but he's not. And there's a guy that disappears at the very beginning and doesn't show up again till the very end. Um, so I'm not sure how you guys feel about group projects, but in industry, every project's a group project. Um, I think it's possible as a student and in academia to be pretty successful independently, independent researcher, or maybe you're the type of person that does 99% of the work on your group project and kind of carry the team on your shoulders. But in business, there's just way too many facets of the business for one person to be kind of the sole contributor. So you really do have to learn that success is dependent on your ability to kind of cooperate and collaborate with other people. Um, and that's difficult because it's now kind of the formula for success is not just your own competence, your own drivenness, right? Success is kind of broader than that, where you're going to have to rely on other people. and learn to work well with other people. Um, so I think where the rubber really meets the road is this means that you have to prioritize the collective progress over your own individual progress. Um, so yeah, when you're kind of like an independent researcher or a student, right, you control the pace. Um, and you can work as quickly as you want, but in industry, you're going to be tasked with things like writing documentation, um, teaching colleagues or more junior people than you, communicating with other stakeholders, giving updates, all these things that will kind of seemingly slow down your individual progress, but are really critical for the success of the organization. Um, and so, yeah, just kind of shift your mindset from like independence, right, to interdependence. Okay, my last and final principle is business need over personal curiosity. Um, so business needs come first. There's definitely less autonomy in industry, um, kind of when it comes to pursuing your own curiosity, pursuing your own sort of personal interests, right? I think for me, um, like as a data scientist, I've really been curious and wanting to learn more about generative AI and kind of applying it to my work. But where I currently work, there's just no practical use cases for it. Like we don't have the right type of data, we don't have the right type of problems for generative AI. And so like my own kind of curiosity, that itch that I have, has to take a back seat to what the business actually needs. Because yeah, at the end of the day, the goal of industry is to build something, right, that's commercially desirable. Um, so, you know, the goal isn't necessarily just to build something that's technically sound. I think as a student, right, that's the aim is this thing has to be technically sound and rigorous. But that's only like half the battle in industry. Like if you can build something that's is sort of technologically advanced and sound as you want, but if it's not commercially viable or desirable, it's worthless to an organization, right? And so this requires that you actually understand what the business needs. Um, so I pulled this screenshot from a GIF um, of something that it's kind of humorously trying to communicate something that happens in business all the time. They're playing back-to-back Pictionary, so you're drawing on someone's back and they're trying to draw what you drew on their back to the next person, and it's kind of like telephone. It's like this compounding chain of reinterpretation, misinterpretation. So by the end, you end up with something that's vastly different from kind of where it started. Um, and so you have like this screenshot here. Where the client is trying to communicate or express their needs, right? And then the business person takes that and sort of interprets it in their own biases and through their own experience, and they communicate it to the developer and so on and so forth. And in the end, um, what you end up building is not really what the customer needs. Um, so my kind of last and final point is that uh, engineers need empathy. Um, it's my belief, and I've seen this in my experience, that true innovation happens when the engineers can get close to the people who have the problem they're trying to solve for. That makes sense. The further you separate kind of the people that are working on the solution from the people experiencing the problem, really the less likely it's going to be that you end up solving the right problem or really making any impact. And so it's critical for engineers to kind of, I guess, think like business people in this way. And really, all I mean by that is you have an ability and a motivation to empathize, right? Do you want to understand the business needs? Do you want to understand who you're building for and what their actual problems are, right? Because these people that you're building for are probably going to be vastly different from you. They could have different jobs, they could have different backgrounds, they could have different mental models of how the world works and stuff. And um, I think if you want to be among the most valuable people in an organization, then you want to be someone like an engineer who has technical skills, but also who is acutely aware of business problems, and what the business needs, what the customer needs. Um, because yeah, there's just an incredible kind of synergy that happens when you can sort of harness both of those um, both of those skill sets. So with that, I think I guess give a let's just skip over the summary part. We'll end it there, and yeah, I'd love to hear any questions or thoughts that you guys have if we have time.
Yeah, so we have time. How would you define a data scientist? What is data science?
Yeah. I think I boil it down in its simplest terms, like someone who knows how to make data useful. However, I guess they've kind of broken that into a lot of specialized roles, right? Because there's a lot of people that make data useful, but I don't know. I hate using like skill sets to define what a role is because I think.
I will give you a definition.
Okay, let's go. Let's hear it.
Data scientist, someone who knows more statistics than a computer scientist, knows more computer science than the statistician. That's really the definition.
Yeah, but that's you're defining it in terms of like skill sets and understanding it. I think that it's kind of a stereotype and it holds true generally, but that's just not my preferred definition. I think as long as you have uh, an understanding of the business needs, right, and you have enough technical chops to be able to look at data and understand what it's trying to tell you and be able to communicate that to end users, and typically it's going to require skills that are maybe a little bit beyond what an analyst does, right? If you have to build like statistical models to do that. So I guess it's taking what an analyst does, which is making kind of communicating the usefulness and the applicability of data, but then also beyond that, you're also tasked with like now you can actually build a product with data, right? So you're building with data as opposed to just using it to communicate to stakeholders.
But that is the business analytics. It is really data science in the context of business. But there are lots of data scientists that are not necessarily doing things in a business environment. There are very valued data scientists in, for example, social sciences, and they do a great job. Okay, and the kind of data science work that they do, it's really needed for their discipline. And of course, there are those that are in computer sciences, etc. So in a given context, or if the context was business, then yes, your definition is correct. What I gave was kind of a, very, very humorous definition, at least in the context of, computer science.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Yes.
In terms of transitioning, particularly for those who are in like research, how would you, or what can someone do to kind of change or adapt behaviors from thinking from a pure innovation perspective, where you're looking at maybe writing the next great paper or thing, to a more solution perspective, where you're looking now, you're out of business and you want to solve a particular problem, like you said, that might not be cutting edge innovation, but it actually solves a problem. Like how can one, I guess, make that transition or transformation?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one way is I talked about wisdom being learned through experience as opposed to being studied. But I think that experience can also be secondhand experience. It doesn't necessarily have to be firsthand experience. So, I talked about getting out there, talking to people in industry that are like solving their particular problems, right? I think it's a great way to get exposure to how people are actually like using these theories, right, to solve meaningful problems at their work. And a lot of times it won't be super sexy, right? It'll be just run of the mill kind of models or techniques, right, that they're applying to make an actual impact. But I think that's helpful. One, and then two, I talked about like preferring like kind of real world application, I guess, over like kind of contrived side projects. So even if, that's like going to work for a nonprofit and doing a small project for that. I have a friend that has done a lot of like kind of database and data architecture work for nonprofits completely for free, right? And like that might be slightly different from what like the job that you want to get, but still like that real world experience, like you will learn just so much by being in the context of an organization, having to work with other people. I don't know. So like I would say just find any way to like contribute to like an actual project, a real world sort of project, whether that's through an organization or like even open source software. I think contributing to open source software is hugely important and valuable. But that's what I would suggest. Yes.
What's the importance of communication in, by writing or making presentations to kind of your advancement and what you've done in the past?
Yeah. I mean, communication is huge. Like I think it kind of depends on your role too. I think especially for data science, um, it's it's pretty critical. So on one level, like communication is important just to pitch your ideas to business stakeholders to get buy-in from them, because ultimately if they don't approve of the work that you're proposing, like you're not going to be able to do it. If you can't do that work and you can't prove like your value to the company. And so there is a little bit of like you're almost selling like your work. You have to understand their perspective enough to like be able to orient what you're pitching kind of in their language in a way that you think they will understand and kind of like resonate with. So that's usually important. And then also on a day-to-day perspective, like, yeah, you have to update people all the time. It's kind of annoying, honestly. Like business people are always like pinging you, asking you what like status updates and stuff. And so written communication is huge from that perspective, just to be able to, uh, I don't know, assure people that things are kind of progressing, to give them sort of updates on, um, I don't know, projected deadlines and so forth. But yeah, I would also say, yeah, from an internal documentation standpoint, if you're going to be somewhat of a resource for like your teammates, um, like writing is huge, right? Because you can't, if you're just having meetings with all of these colleagues and junior engineers who need your help and stuff, like that's going to deplete all of your time. But if you can write good documentation that kind of outlives you or is able to be asynchronously read, right, and understood, like that will takes a lot of time in the beginning, right? But I think pays dividends going forward.
I will add a couple complementary comments. Maybe then Victor was meant to bring this issue for our undergraduate students. When I get calls from recruiters about one of the students who has used my name as a reference, they normally do not ask about technical abilities because, of course, they can see it on the transcript, 4.4 GPA, etc. What they normally ask, and very often, the first question is communication. Very often. And when we talk about communication, it's not just, everything that you described, plus email, plus meeting, plus technical, for example, documents that they have to write, etc. All of those are elements of good communication. So that's one thing. And the second thing that very often, not very often, always they ask me is whether the individual is a team player. So teamwork is essential, communication is essential, and those two are normally the first two questions that recruiters ask me.
Yeah, the source of my
Well
question
said.
is that a lot of engineers, I was one of them many years ago, liked engineering because I only had to take 2 English classes and didn't like to write. And it became very clear that if you want to be successful, you need to be good at technical writing and getting your ideas out there. So
Yeah, yeah, that's right. I think that goes to kind of what I was trying to get at with like if being competent in your own role is only part of the equation, right? Like you'll very much hit a ceiling very quickly if you're not a team player. Like you could be the most brilliant individual contributor, right? Have all the technical chops, right? But like, yeah, if you can't help other people, if you can't contribute to people other than yourself, if you can't communicate with people well, like you're just gonna hit a ceiling fast. So if your desire is to kind of excel in business, excel in your field, then communication, you know, is definitely important and probably the hardest thing to master.
what do you see the demand in Kansas City for computer scientists and data scientists? Is it still kind of a high demand for people, or is it flattening off any?
Uh, I don't really know. To be honest, I work remotely right now for a startup based in SF. I mean, that is one pattern, obviously, that we're seeing is the availability of remote work where, um, you know, but I think, I guess, given like the amount of meetups that are still in Kansas City, like there's still a decent community out here. And so it's always encouraging to see. But even if you go to these meetups, a lot of these people are like remote workers. They don't even work for Kansas City companies. Um, but yeah, I wish I had a better pulse on it. I
Well,
don't
how
know.
do you build so much you said about networking and helping your colleagues and all that? How do you do that when you're working remote?
Yeah, so um, that is one kind of culture shift or culture shock that I experienced when I started working at a startup remotely is just how much of your communication needs to be asynchronous now. So writing becomes much more important.